You want to have an impactful life. You want your life to matter. I know this because we all do. And we all see things in the world, things that break our heart and tug on our heartstrings, that we want to be able to make a difference in those things. That's what we're talking about today. How do we live impactful lives? Like, first, what are the obstacles to living those impactful lives? And then how do we take steps to overcome those obstacles? Well, last week we started a new series called Movement. Now, a movement is a group of people that come together to work towards a common goal to make a difference. As followers of Jesus, we are part of one of the oldest and most influential movements of all time, commonly referred to today as Christianity. This movement is all about loving God and loving others, and also the way that we love ourselves. This commitment to love and goodness continues to have a huge impact on the world. Now, maybe you've heard someone say before, you can change the world. And if no one's told you that, I want you to know that you can change the world. You can impact the world that we live in. And I hope that when you hear that, that gets you excited, thinking about how you can join alongside other people and be part of a movement to be really impactful in our world. And I hope that you're like, yes, sign me up. That's something I want to be part of. But I know that for lots of us, you might hear me talking about making an impact on the world, and you really don't think much of it. Like, maybe you've heard people say that before, that you can change the world with your life, but you kind of look around and you're like, it seems like most people's lives are pretty ordinary. Like, yeah, there are those people that seem to have a lot of influence and fame, but that doesn't seem like that's the case for most people. And so even though it sounds cool to you to think about having a really impactful life, you're like, I just don't know if that's real. And so I'll remind you that even those of us that are living the most ordinary lives, we still impact the people that we know. And then those people impact the people that they know. And so the ripple effects of the way that you live your life have the potential to still be very impactful. As we talk about changing the world, you might start thinking things like, that sounds like a whole lot more responsibility than I'm ready for. Also, I'm in middle school, so what can be expected of me, really? And also, you might be thinking, the world is also a huge place. There are billions of people, and I am one person, and I am a young person, right? What kind of impact can I actually have? Or you might be excited to make an impact, but you're like, I wouldn't even know where to start. And if I did somehow figure out where to start, I'd probably get really overwhelmed, and then I'd be too scared, and I'd be like, not for me, man, right? And trust me, I 100% get that. Part of the reason that I know some of the things you might be thinking is because I've thought those things myself, right? You're not alone in feeling scared or intimidated by the idea of trying to make an impact in the world. Because some of the ways we want to be impactful, some of the problems we see, they just seem so huge that we're like, well, how can I, as one person, have any sort of meaningful impact? It feels sometimes like the task is too big and that we are too small. You might also feel too small because you might feel like, well, I don't know enough about that. And if I learned more about how to make an impact, then I'm just one person and I wouldn't really know where to start. Or I'm a person who messes up a lot. And so who am I to try and go to make some big impact? Or you might feel like the thing you care about, that you're the only one that cares about it. And you're like, if nobody else cares about this, what kind of impact am I going to make? And you might be kind of afraid that if you started trying to take some steps that you'd get overwhelmed and you're like, better just to not start because I don't want to fail. And we're kind of afraid of failing, right? But what if I told you all of this changing the world, making an impact with your life stuff really is possible for you? And it's possible even if you don't become a celebrity or an influencer. In fact, it's something that can happen in big and small ways, this whole changing the world thing, particularly when we participate in a movement with other people that desire similar changes and when we follow Jesus in the process. If you try to take on the giant burden of changing the world by yourself, it will seem like too much and it will get overwhelming. But if you come alongside others and if you trust that God is at work and that you are making that change with God at work in what you're doing and alongside other people, that's how you start to have a huge impact. In fact, this is an example that Jesus gave his followers thousands of years ago that is equally true today. So today we're going to look at the challenge that Jesus gave his disciples, which were the closest people to him while he was walking around here on earth. So these people did everything with Jesus. They witnessed him making an impact on the world with these unbelievable and life-changing miracles and speaking wisdom to people that they had never heard in that way before. So here's Jesus. He's healing the sick. He's calming the sea. He's raising people from the dead. Here he is challenging these disciples to go and make an impact on the world. And so I want you to listen to what Jesus says to them. And you can find this in Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 through 20. It says, Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands that I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So Jesus is passing the baton to his disciples. They've watched him change the world. They've watched him perform these incredible miracles. And now he's telling them, go and teach other people about Jesus and what it means to live a life that is all about loving other people. And he also reminds them that he will always be with them, that they are never alone in the impact that they're trying to have in the world. And so I imagine that if I'm one of these disciples, that feels really overwhelming. I'm thinking like, no, Jesus, like you're the one who's having the impact. And you're like, not me. I am not the one. Like, let's find somebody else who's like more qualified for this. I'm just like an ordinary person. Leave all that like world changer stuff to somebody who knows what they're doing. Like, I'm just like a regular person, right? And isn't that what we so often think? Like, that we're not qualified to have any sort of meaningful impact on the world because we're just ordinary people. And so we start looking around at like, who is some celebrity or some influencer or someone who's older or knows more than I do? Because a lot of times our response is a lot like the disciples' response probably was. They were probably scared, and overwhelmed. But I want you to notice that they have an important lesson and reminder for us. Even if we're scared and overwhelmed, we're like, not me, no. That in order to make a meaningful impact on the world, we have to be willing to push past that fear. Because the fear is what holds us back. Oftentimes we fear that we are not qualified, that the task is too big, that we're going to fail, and it keeps us from making much of a difference because we're afraid. In order to make a difference, we have to be willing to do things that are outside of our comfort zone and not cave to that fear. So even though the disciples probably felt unqualified, like, no, Jesus, like you make the change. I'll just be over here watching, right? They probably felt overwhelmed, underqualified. Jesus still called them to do it. He gave them a big vision for the impact that they could have, right? Did he know that sometimes they would be scared? Yes, I'm sure Jesus knew that. Did Jesus know that it would be difficult sometimes? Yes, even more than they would ever know. But listen to what Jesus says. He also knew that with him, the disciples could do it. His belief in them helped them to believe too, both in themselves and in the movement, and to know that they are invited to participate in this movement, but that God is at work in all of it. Jesus was passing the baton for impacting the world to his disciples. It was like he's saying, okay, now it's your turn. Now you go and make an impact on the world. And the same is true for us. Jesus is saying to us, it's your turn. It's your turn to serve, to speak up, to share the good news, to love other people, to be part of this movement to change the world. And he's also telling us that sometimes it means we're going to do things that we are afraid to do. And it's okay to feel afraid. But courage is when we feel afraid and we push through it. We decide to do it anyway. Courage isn't not feeling afraid. It's we feel afraid and we think, oh, maybe I'm underqualified, but I do care about this thing. And we push past that fear to make a difference. The amazing changes that we want to see in the world, we can be part of making them happen. But in order to do that, we have to push past those fears and get out of our comfort zones in order to make a difference. Just think about the disciples. Were they scared? Were they overwhelmed? Absolutely. But they did it anyway. They took small steps to make big changes in the world. They kept the movement of Jesus growing and going so that we can still be part of it 2,000 years later. So how were they able to do that? Well, let's look back at the last thing that Jesus said in that passage. This is Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. He says, "Be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Jesus promised to be with the disciples always. Not just sometimes, not just when it was easy, not just when they needed him, always. And it's the same promise that he makes to you and me. As followers of Jesus, his very spirit lives inside of us. He goes with us wherever we go. He's closer than close. When we join the movement and we step out to do something that scares us, but we step out to do it because we care and because we know it's important and because we want to impact our world, Jesus is with us in that. And we can feel comforted in that because we know we're not alone. Jesus is with us in it. And also, we're doing it with other people. Just imagine what could happen if we simply decide to start and not cave to those fears. If we decide to take the baton that Jesus is passing to us and run with it. If we did the thing that we're scared to do. If we didn't let our fears stop us. The cool thing is that the movement is already happening. This isn't new. All it means is that what we have to do is just join in. There are already people doing lots of good and meaningful work in the world to make a difference, and we just have to join into that movement. And if we do, the possibilities to impact and help others are endless. But it starts with we have to be willing to do something that might be outside of our comfort zone, something we're scared to do. So here are some ways you can think about doing that. First, name what you're scared to do. Now, I'm not talking about I am scared of roller coasters. I am scared of going in haunted corn mazes. That's not what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about the thing that you are afraid to do that you know might have a meaningful impact in the world around you. And then those meaningful impacts ripple out to other people. For example, it might look like you sign up to go on that next service trip. It might look like loving the person in your family that is hard to love, because you're going to be a person who has a ripple effect of putting more love out there and being gracious and kind and let that ripple out into the world. Or it might mean that you donate your allowance to a cause that is important to you. It might mean that you choose to say something to someone that is being hurt or bullied. It might mean that you learn about an organization or a person that is already working to serve others in big ways that you care about, and then you come alongside them. It might mean that you serve others in a regular and intentional way. Whatever it is, name that thing that you know could be impactful, but you're a little scared to do. And then ask God to give you some courage to do it. And again, courage is when we are afraid, but we do it anyway. Ask God to help you do something that you think that you can't do for someone else, but you feel compelled to do it because you know it is a good thing that can have a good impact on our world. To make the impact that you're not sure that you can make, and be reminded that you're not doing it alone. You're doing it with God. Pray that he'll give you those words, the actions, the courage, the thoughts to make it happen. And ask God to help you take the first step to join along that movement. Last, do the thing. The thing you are scared to do. Do it. The thing you know could have an impact. And it might feel small to you, but it's really important to take that first step. And no positive good thing is wasted, right? So do the next thing that moves you in the right direction. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming to look at a big whole movement, right? So instead, just think of what's that next step? What's the next right good thing that you can do? All these big movements were started with just small steps, and yours can be too. So take one step by signing up to serve, or texting that person that is hard to love, or by asking to get together with an adult to talk about or research or learn about a cause that is important to you. Your Crosspoint community, the adults, your small group, we would be excited to come alongside you as you're trying to make positive efforts in this world, as you're trying to impact this world. We want to support you, love you, cheer you on in the way that you feel compelled to impact this world. Remember, you are not doing this alone. God promises the disciples that He is with them always, and He promises you and I the same thing. His very Spirit is already alive inside of you and calling you to go and do good work in this world. He will never leave you. He will always help you. And if He calls you to do something that you are scared to do, He will go with you when you do it.